August is here, fall camps have begun, and if you're watching this video, I'm assuming you know what that means. College football is back. We're counting down the days at this point until our first college football Saturday. If you didn't know, my name is Michael Fordham. Last year in college football, hit at a 55% clip and netted over 27 units. Feel even better about how I'm going to do this year. I'm going to have tons of college football content over on Twitter. You can follow me there at Fordham Betting, as well as here on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming content I'll have, both preseason and then absolutely as we break down some games. I've done full breakdowns of each of the other 4 power conferences. I've given out futures. I've given out season win totals, but today is a special video. I mean, the SEC is the granddaddy of them all. So I'm really excited to get into this video. The way I'm going to structure it, as always, I'm going to go ahead and give you my picks first. I have 2 season win totals for today. Didn't have any conference futures in the SEC. I think it's going to be Alabama and Georgia, but there's literally no value in betting that. How both those teams are priced, obviously, this is just a conference where, taking flyers on a team like Tennessee to win the SEC, it's just not really going to work out for you. I'll give you the 2 season win totals, and then I'll give you my thoughts on the rest of the teams here in the SEC. There will be timestamps in the description as well. So if you want to flip around from team to team and just hear my thoughts as you please, check the description, and I'll have timestamps down there. One quick thing before we get started. If you like what you hear today, feel free to like the video. That would really help out the growth and what I'm trying to build on this channel, kind of along those same lines. If you like what I say, if you don't like what I say, which some of you might not like what I say today, feel free to let me know in the comments. I want to hear everything you'll have to say, and I'm happy to chop it up with y'all like I did on that quarterback tier ranking video. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and get right into it. So I have 1 over and 1 under here in my 2 season win total bets. I'll go ahead and start it off positive. I love this Arkansas team. I thought 7.5 was the wrong number. I had them at just over 8 wins on the year, but I think their upside is higher than that. Breaking down their team, I don't know if there was a more surprising guy for me last year than KJ Jefferson. I mean, he's a bigger dude, and I just kind of maybe underestimated his ability as a passer. I mean, 67%, over 9 yards per attempt, 7-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. Oh, and then he's also got 550 yards on the ground as well. Working with Kendall Briles in that system that has just worked for so long. I mean, say what you want about the Briles family, that system works, and it worked last year. But so Jefferson obviously has benefited from that. But this is a team that was one of the most efficient ground games last year in the country. I mean, they had 3 separate backs last year that all averaged over 5 yards per carry on the ground. Whether it be Raheem Sanders or Dominic Johnson or AJ Green, this is a deep running back room. And I liked what I saw from the offensive line last year. They returned 4 of those starters, got a lot of upward trajectory last year, stepped up in competition better than maybe even I thought they would. So I think they'll be able to run the ball as well as protect Jefferson again this year. I think the one question about this offense is obviously it's hard to replace a guy like Treylon Burks. I mean, Treylon Burks is just a pure football player. I know they added Jaden Hazelwood from Oklahoma. Personally, in my opinion, don't think he's necessarily fit to take over that big of a role. So I would expect Jefferson to maybe spread the wealth a little bit more this year. But one thing he will have at his disposal, let's have 2 really good tight end options in both Trey Knox and Hudson Henry. So 2 good safety nets over the middle of the field. And, I think there's enough potential on the outside to where there shouldn't be much of a drop-off in that receiving core. Defensively, the Arkansas team, very unique system with Barry Odom as defensive coordinator. He puts a lot of responsibilities on his safeties. I mean, Jalen Catalon is a guy that can play at all 3 levels. I mean, he's a first-team all-conference preseason defensive back, and they use him in a lot of creative ways. They got Bumper Pool at linebacker. Sam Pittman did some great work in the transfer portal this offseason. Added a guy like Drew Sanders from Alabama, former 5-star guy. I think Sanders is the guy that you really have to watch out for, but they now have a lot of depth at that linebacker position. I liked him in the interior defensive line. I guess my one concern maybe is just, how some of those guys off the edge generate a pass rush. But like I said, Barry Odom is a guy that uses his safeties in some very unique ways. They come downhill hard. A guy like Jaden Catalon is going to be able to make up for maybe some, questions off the edge. So I do like this defense. It's a very unique scheme. Overall, though, looking at their schedule, Arkansas, I think, actually has the toughest schedule in the country. Playing a team in Cincinnati week 1. One thing about Cincinnati, no more Desmond Ridder. They obviously lost Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant, who are, two of the best cornerbacks in the country. So, some key losses early in the season for Cincinnati to make up for. I have a really hard time seeing Arkansas lose that game. I think they're 7-point favorites last time I checked. That's one of those games where, I might not lay the 7 with Arkansas, but I might tease that down to -1 or throw them in a money line parlay because I really just don't see Arkansas losing that game. South Carolina that next week. South Carolina got a lot better at quarterback this offseason, but especially early in the year, I think they just have too many holes. I don't know how good they are up front on either side of the ball, and think they just have a lot of question marks right now. So I think that's a win for Arkansas as well. Obviously, Missouri State. So in my mind, this team starts off 3-0. So good thing to begin with. These next 4 games is where it gets hairy. At least the way I look at season win totals, I'm not trying to go out on too big of a limb. Could they beat Alabama? I think they have as good of a chance as most other teams do, but I'm not going to go out on that big of a limb preseason. From there, I think that A&M game, I think on paper, I give A&M a slight edge, but I think there could be a massive quarterback disparity in that game. That's certainly a winnable game. Enjoy those next 2 games. I mean, at Mississippi State, I'm going to say this a lot throughout the video. I think Mississippi State is a wild card team. I could see them putting a fort in a lot of team seasons. Having to prepare for that air raid. I mean, think about it. You go from playing Alabama, and then you got BYU the next week. Oh, and mixed in between, you got Mike Leach in that air raid scheme. Like I said, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. I think that's closer to a toss-up game on the road in Starkville than anything. And then you got to go on the road to BYU. I know a lot of people watching this video who are SEC fans might look down on a team like BYU. Oh, that's not a real test. First of all, you're playing in Provo, Utah. Anything can happen in Provo, Utah. And second of all, a team like BYU is really good up front. So I think they actually can match Arkansas's physicality. I think I do give Arkansas the slight edge in that game. But, man, I mean, that's a tough 2-game road stretch right there. With that being said, to close out the season, I think Arkansas could win 4, if not these last 5 games. I mean, at Auburn, I just think Auburn's passing game is going to be so poor. It's going to be hard for them to win some of these games. I'll give Arkansas the slight edge in that one. Don't think Liberty's that strong this year. I don't think LSU's that strong this year either. Yeah, I know they played Arkansas close last year. 3rd straight home game that next week against Ole Miss. I think that's closer to a toss-up game. I don't have a great read on Ole Miss preseason. I've heard a lot of mixed reports about how they feel about Jackson Dart. Certainly a game that Arkansas feels like they should win. And then closing the year out at Missouri, I think Missouri could surprise some people, but I certainly think Arkansas should get that one done. Going through this, I had Arkansas just above 8 wins. And then when you combine that we're getting plus 135 on a low number to begin with, I saw a lot of value in this play. I think it's really going to come down to that A&M game is going to be crucial in that 3-game road stretch at Mississippi State, at BYU, and at Auburn. Count me in. Arkansas over the 7.5 wins for a half unit. Now that I kind of talked up one team, I'm not dismantling the other necessarily, but I think it's hard for first-year coaches to come in and have immediate success, especially when you're coming into a situation where the culture was a major question. And I think that's what Billy Napier has on his hands at Florida. I played their under 7 wins at even money, just a half unit play once again. I'm not somebody that likes to spray the board preseason. We're going to have tons of action throughout the regular season. So I know Anthony Richardson at quarterback. A lot of people think he's a true Heisman contender. I kind of chuckle at that. I think that's crazy to say this early. He's unproven. I mean, in limited time last year, less than 60% completion, and that touchdown to interception ratio was around 1-to-1. Obviously, he's a huge threat with his legs. He gives Billy Napier a very, athletic quarterback, but he's not an established thrower. I mean, at the end of the day, and for as many tough games as they're going to play, a lot of those games are going to fall on his arm. I'm not saying he can't develop into a good quarterback, but I think he's gotten way too much hype. I mean, to be honest with you, I think it's more likely that Jack Miller takes over at some point than Anthony Richardson becomes this high-level player that people think he is. The reason I say it's going to fall on his arm, I just don't think this run game is going to be all that special. I mean, it's not that they don't have options. Guys that are stepping up in a level. I mean, this is not lower levels of college football anymore. This is the SEC. This offensive line, I mean, they have Osiris Torrance. I mean, first team all SEC offensive lineman, but that's a position group where you need all 5 guys working together in unison. I don't necessarily think their offensive line is bad per se, but going up against as many good defensive lines as they're going to go up against, I think this is just a team that could have their struggles trying to establish a run game. And, the reason that's tough too, and what kind of makes it hard on Richardson, I mean, wide receivers on this team were maybe the biggest disappointment overall last year. Failed to create separation. That was a big problem last year. I know Florida had a ton of problems, a lot of them defensively as time went on. I think this wide receiving core is anything but a sure thing for a young quarterback. I'll say this too. Billy Napier brought Rob Sale with him from Louisiana to run this offense. Billy Napier built a great program at Louisiana, but their offense was nothing special. I mean, that was a team that played a lot of close games and was certainly built around what they had defensively. So defensively, I think their top level talent along the front four is good. Gervon Dexter is kind of the leader of that front four. One concern I have is just depth. And, depth is a big thing, especially playing in a conference like this. Depth is important because when you're playing all these physical games, guys are probably going to get hurt. I mean, that's football. So, depth being a major concern, especially up front, it's definitely not something you'd like to hear going into the season. I think their frontline linebacker should be good. I think it's actually probably the strength of the defense, whether it be Brenton Cox or Ventrell Miller, should be a pretty good linebacking core. I think the secondary could be solid as well, but I'm going to need to see it to believe it. I mean, that defense really just kind of fell apart in all phases last year, if we're being honest. So I'm going to need to see just overall improvement once again. And I'm about to go through the schedule right now, but I want to reiterate, it's really tough for a first-year head coach to come into a situation like this where this team just kind of fell apart last year. I know Billy Napier is recruiting really well right now, but you still got to work with the guys you got. And I guarantee you there's guys on that team that are bad culture guys. So I think that's just an overall concern as well. They've also got a brutal start to the season. We're going to find out a lot about this team these first 2 weeks. Hosting Utah and Kentucky the first 2 weeks, on paper, I actually marked both of those up as slight losses. Now, I don't necessarily think they're going to go 0-2 in those games. I don't think they're going to go 2-0. Listen, I know Utah's in the Pac-12, and SEC fans like to pop off about some of these other conferences. Utah won the Pac-12 last year. They were a really physical team up front, and they can run the football. That's a tough game. Utah is favored. Utah should be favored. I actually lean towards Utah winning that game. I'm not, all that high on Kentucky. I think that's closer to a toss-up game. We'll see, though. I mean, nevertheless, 2 really tough home games to start the year. Things do get easier with South Florida and Eastern Washington. I think at Tennessee is a really tough game. I just think Tennessee's offense is going to be so good this year with Hendon Hooker back and the way they can run the football as well. With my concerns about this Florida offense, I just don't know if they can keep up. I know Tennessee has maybe their defensive concerns, if you will, but I think that's a game that Florida probably loses. Now, before that bye week, you got Missouri and LSU. On paper, both of those look like wins. I think Missouri is a team, though, that's going to surprise people in some of these bigger games. I mean, they beat Florida last year in Columbia. Obviously, this is in Gainesville, but that's not a surefire win for Florida. I have a lot of the same concerns about LSU as I do Florida. I'd say the one thing that LSU has that Florida doesn't is they have Kayshon Boutte on the outside. And Florida just doesn't have a guy like that to work with a young quarterback. You give Florida the slight edge in that game, but things are going to get just extremely tough after that bye week. I mean, you play Georgia and A&M. Don't see you winning either one of those games. You'll go on the road and beat Vanderbilt. I think South Carolina is an interesting team. I still think Shane Beamer has got lots of work to do to make that an 8-9 win caliber team. I think they'll be fighting to make a bowl game this year, but we saw Florida kind of throw in the towel when things didn't go their way last year. You're telling me if they lose decisively to Georgia and A&M, that there's not going to be guys on that team who pout and don't come back and play hard against South Carolina? This happens with teams who have first-year head coaches. With those guys don't have their cultures in place, things like that happen. I give them the slight edge on paper. I think that's a very losable game. And then this is kind of a hot take, I guess. I don't think Florida's going to go on the road and beat Florida State. I played Florida State season 1 total over. I think that's a much better offense than given credit for. I think they have a lot more balance. And listen, top to bottom, I think Florida State's a better football team. I really do. So seeing their win total at 7, I think this is a 6-6 team with the potential. If Florida starts to not have things go their way, I just think the culture there is not yet in place. I see this as a team that's going to be fighting to go 6-6. Maybe they do go 7-5 and we push. That's obviously not out of the cards. Anything can happen. I like my odds here, though. So I did play the under the 7. Got it even money, like I said. And listen, at the end of the day, if we push, we push. I don't think we will. I mean, I see very little chance to go 8-4. So I do see a push being the worst case scenario, at least the way I look at it. So yeah, I did play Florida under the 7 wins. We're going to get into the rest of the teams in the SEC in a second. I know y'all been looking at my shirt this whole time. I mean, we got the patriotic donuts here. One of them's got a bite taken out of him, actually. I know y'all been looking at me the whole time. And, I know you've been asking yourself, can I look as cool and sexy as the guy on my screen right now? Well, I'm going to tell you how. Proud 90 Golf. Unique polos, but very comfortable as well. Proud 90's got a great selection of polos, t-shirts. If you want to get a head start on the fall and the winter, they got a great selection of hoodies and quarter zips as well. Obviously, a style like this may not be everybody's forte. They do have more traditional styles as well. If you go to proud90.com and browse their selection, if you see anything you like, you can get 15% off your order by using the code Fordham at checkout. It's going to be right there as you enter your payment information. It's going to say discount code Fordham. It's going to get you 15% off your entire order. So I'll add this too. They recently added a women's line as well. So whether you are a lady, if you want to treat that special someone, Proud 90's got all your golf apparel needs. Proud90.com. Code Fordham gets you 15% off. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also click the link in the description as well. Support me. Support Proud 90. Let's get right back into the video. All right, now that we got those two season win totals out of the way, going to get into the rest of the conference. We're going to go top to bottom as far as odds go, starting with Alabama. Obviously, made the national championship game last year. Lost that game to Georgia, who we'll get to next. This Alabama team figures to be better this year. You've got Bryce Young back, who won the Heisman Trophy last year. 11-1 touchdown to interception ratio is elite. That's why you won the Heisman. 9.5 yards per attempt. I will say maybe the one concern about the passing game, maybe early in the season, is that you obviously lose John Mechie and Jamison Williams. Jermaine Burton does transfer in from Florida, but he's never been a feature receiver before, and it's kind of a new system. I don't know if that's going to go as smoothly as people think. I think Burton's a high floor player per se, but I don't know if he's got the talent level of some of the wide receivers that Nick Saban has had these past 3 or 4 years. With that being said, with the way Saban recruits, there's obviously the Jimmies and Joes to find that next superstar. The one thing about this offense that I think will assuredly improve is the run game. I mean, I thought Jahmyr Gibbs was one of the best pickups in the transfer portal this offseason. Running back from Georgia Tech, over 5 yards per carry in his 2 years at Georgia Tech. Maybe his best asset, though, is out of the backfield as a receiver. Over 770 yards in his 2 years at Georgia Tech. Brian Robinson was a solid back last year. I think he gave Alabama a high floor, but Brian Robinson wasn't a game-changing back the way that somebody like Jahmyr Gibbs could be. And also some of those young running backs that, did get injured last year, like a Trey Sanders, like a Jace McClellan. Those guys are not only a year older, they're healthy. So I think this is a running game that should improve this year, as long as Bill O'Brien actually runs the ball when they're inside the 5. As far as offensive line, yeah, you lose Evan Neal, but 3 starters do return all on the interior. I mean, maybe some of the better pass rushing teams could have somewhat of an edge if those tackles don't pan out. But this offense is going to be elite once again. You'd be pretty hard pressed to tell me otherwise. And not only that, but this is probably the best pass rushing team in college football. I mean, Will Anderson should have absolutely been in New York last year. Video game numbers coming off the edge, both in the tackles for loss category and the sack category. He's the best defensive player in college football, maybe the best player in college football in general. And they also got Dallas Turner too. They're deep on the D line, which they're probably going to rotate a lot of those guys on the interior. Very similar to how Kirby Smart does. They have Toa Toa coming back at linebacker, but do need to fill in one of those other roles. Like I said, the way Saban recruits, I think he's earned the benefit of the doubt at this point. I'm interested to see how a guy like Elias Ricks transitions to Alabama. I mean, this is a guy that was very highly touted during his time at LSU. Wasn't as effective of a football player as I think people might think just by that name alone. He obviously has the potential to become a lockdown corner. It's going to be interesting to see if he will. I think Alabama's got really good safety as well. So, their season win total is at 11.5. I mean, personally, there is zero value in betting an over 11.5. We saw it with Alabama last year, obviously losing to A&M. Probably should have lost at Auburn. It's hard to win on the road in conference play. It's hard to go undefeated. So, that's a pretty tall task to actually put your money on. I think the toughest stretch is right before that bye week. They're going to have a 4-game stretch where they go to Arkansas, they host A&M, then they go to Tennessee, and then they come back and host Mississippi State. I've already, gushed about Arkansas. Saw Arkansas play them really close last year in Tuscaloosa. I think this game could be pretty close once again too. I really like the way A&M is built, and we'll get to that in a second. It basically took a miracle performance from Zach Calzada for A&M to win that game. So I'm not going to expect that to happen now in Tuscaloosa this year. Tennessee played Alabama close for 3 quarters last year. I thought that was a misleading final score. Thought that was a much closer game than people probably who didn't watch it realize. So now on the road at Neyland, that could be an interesting game. And then, like I said, Mississippi State is just going to be a team that, with that air raid scheme, it's just hard to prepare for. It's much different than what you're going to see probably the rest of the season. So, I'm not saying they're going to win the game, but, could cover. The rest of the way, though, I don't really think LSU or Ole Miss, as far as just now, I don't see Alabama having much trouble winning those games. So they should win every game they play. And the reality of it is, if they were to go 11-1, we would be, shocked that they lost that one game. So, I get the appeal in betting over 11.5. It's just not my style. With that said, with all the advantages this team has on both sides of the ball, should very well be back in the playoff once again. All right, now moving on to Georgia. I have a large affinity for Georgia. Bet them heavy in the national championship game. It was obviously a storybook type of season. They have a lot back, but then they also lost a lot too. So we'll kind of get into it. Stetson Bennett is back as a starting quarterback. Listen, there's this perception that Stetson Bennett, if he was playing at Missouri, he'd just be an average guy. That might be true, but at the end of the day, you can only play with the hand that you're dealt. And listen, Stetson Bennett did a fantastic job last year. Over 10 yards per attempt. That's probably my favorite passing stat to judge quarterbacks on, because it measures both efficiency, but also your ability as a downfield thrower. Over 10 yards per attempt is an elite mark. I think he's actually more talented than given credit for. I thought he did a great job last year. Georgia is always going to be able to run the ball. Kirby Smart has never had that one just guy that's going to run the ball 30 times a game, but usually goes by a committee approach. Kenny McIntosh and Kendall Milton, both guys that have garnered experience up to this point. So I'm not really expecting a big drop off just because they did lose some backs off of last year's team. I guess maybe where I am concerned about is wide receiver. Like I said, they lost Burton. They lost George Pickens off of last year's team. But that being said, though, I think they more than make up for maybe that weakness with what they have at tight end. Brock Bowers was a godsend last year for that team. Now they got Arik Gilbert back too, who was once one of the most highly touted tight end prospects in the country. So, do you think Bennett's got plenty to work with? I expect the offensive line to be borderline elite once again. Returning 3 starters, it was a great unit last year. Should be a great unit once again this year. Basically, the questions come defensively. They obviously had, so much talent on last year's team that is now in the NFL. Tons of those guys drafted in the first round. I do think their defensive line will see, somewhat of a drop off, but it's still going to be a really good unit. I think Kirby Smart's done so well up front just since he's been at Georgia. And, it doesn't hurt to have a guy like Jalen Carter leading the way. Obviously, Nolan Smith is a first-team all-conference linebacker on the outside. I do think they need to find something on the interior at that second level to really kind of take on that role of Nakobe Dean. I'm not saying that you can ever replace a guy like that, both intangibly and then just talent level, but they have Kelly Ringo at cornerback, still duking it out for that other cornerback spot. This should be a really good secondary. I really like what they have at safety. But their season 1 total is at 11. Once again, I just don't see much value in betting it over 11 just because, one bad game, which, I think every team is going to have, is going to do you in. I don't see Oregon as a huge threat to win that game. It's really, I guess, later in the season. Once again, Mississippi State, because listen, that Mississippi State game is kind of a trap game. It's tucked there in between Tennessee and then at Kentucky, which we'll obviously see where Kentucky is that point of the season. I think if Georgia were to drop a game, it'd probably be somewhere in that Tennessee, at Mississippi State, or at Kentucky, that 3-game span. With that being said, I'm not going to predict that happens preseason. You don't win a national championship by fluke. And, this team still has a lot coming back. I expect great things from them once again. All right, Texas A&M. I've said it many times, I'm a Texas fan, but I actually like this A&M team a lot. The reality of it is the way that Jimbo Fisher has built that roster. This is a team with a lot of elite talent. And the fact that they went 8-4 last year is nothing short of a disappointment. The reality of it is if they just had average quarterback play, this probably would have been a 10-2 team. And obviously there's still a quarterback battle right now. I've seen Max Johnson is taking more first team reps. Personally, I would make that move. Obviously, Johnson is experienced from his time at LSU. He's not going to light the world on fire. I think he's an average quarterback, to be quite honest. But the one thing that Johnson's not going to do is he's not going to lose you games. I mean, 35 touchdowns to 7 interceptions throughout his time at LSU. He takes care of the football. Like I said, he doesn't have elite arm talent. The other two guys in that competition are more talented, but that doesn't mean that they're better for this team. So I would roll with Johnson. I think he by far gives them the highest floor this year. This is probably going to be a team that pounds the ground game. Yeah, they lose Isaiah Spiller, but Devin Achane has Olympic-type speed. 7 yards per carry last year, 9 touchdowns as a backup. He'll probably go well over 1,000 yards this year and break off a ton of big runs. I really don't like what they have at wide receiver. I know they brought in Evan Stewart in this past recruiting cycle, but it really just comes down to I don't like Jimbo Fisher's offensive system that much. It would help if a guy like Stewart, we'll see what happens if somebody in that room emerges, but the reality of it is this team can win a lot of games without having some explosive offense in the passing game. I thought their offensive line got a lot better throughout last season and should continue that into this year, but it's really defensively. Their defensive line is super deep, similar to the way Alabama's is, similar to the way Georgia's is. Jimbo Fisher is going to be able to rotate a lot of those guys in. They're going to be able to get after the quarterback. They're just going to be able to maul a lot of people up front. Not only that, they might have one of the best secondaries in college football. Antonio Johnson is obviously a second-team all-conference preseason pick. They've got a really good tandem at safeties, and I think they should be quite good at corner. I think teams are going to have a hard time moving the ball vertically against this defense. Season win totals at 9. If anything, I'd probably play it over. The only game that I count as a surefire loss is at Alabama. I just don't see them winning that game. I think a lot of people will look at that Miami game early in the year. The reality of it is Miami is nowhere near a point where they can match A&M's physicality up front. I think Mario Cristobal will get that program to that point one day like he did at Oregon, but I think it's just a total mismatch up front. So I don't see A&M having really any worries about losing that game. I think Arkansas is going to be an interesting game. I really do. Saw Arkansas just absolutely pound A&M last year. I think that's going to be a one-possession game either direction. Once again, I said I was going to say this a lot. At Mississippi State is a tough game, mixed in between Arkansas and at Alabama. That's a tough spot going on the road. I really just think that air raid system is tough to prepare for because it's just so unlike what you're going to face a lot of the year. After that bye week, though, they could easily go 6-0. Not easily, but it's not unfathomable to think that they could go 6-0. Obviously, playing at South Carolina is tough, and Auburn as well. But both those teams just have a lot of concerns. Where preseason, I'm going to expect A&M to get the job done. I'm not that high on Florida or LSU. UMass is a game they should win by 50. I do give them the advantage against Ole Miss as well. I actually would lean over the 9. I tend not to play season win totals unless it's a pretty large discrepancy as to how I view this team versus how they're priced. So I made it closer to 9.5. I would play it towards the over. Obviously, you'd love if they had more explosiveness in the passing game, but you just can't count on it this year. I could very well see them going 10-2, but didn't play it. All right, now on to Ole Miss. Coming off a great 2021 season. Obviously, though, lost a lot off that team. No Matt Corral, and just a lot of older veteran type players and coaches. They did have a mix up in their coaching staff as well, led by Jeff Lebby, who's now at Oklahoma. So it's kind of a new look team. And like I said, it starts at quarterback. Personally, I didn't think it would be much competition at this point. I thought Jackson Dart would have been named the starter by now, but we just haven't seen him really pull away in this job. Kind of looking at his numbers from last year, 62%, 7.2 yards per attempt. That's not, world beating whatsoever. He's still a young guy. I guess maybe I overlooked that aspect. I did kind of think just with how much hype was around that pickup for Lane Kiffin that it wouldn't have been much, choice at this point, but it seems like it is. So it will be interesting to see if they go with the Luke Allmeyer route. I know he didn't play well against Baylor in that Sugar Bowl, but tough situation to walk into. Wouldn't really hold that against him. Listen, Zach Evans has the potential to be a great running back, if not, one of the top 2 or 3 running backs in the SEC. I mean, at TCU last year, 7 yards per carry. This was a guy who was a 5-star, was supposed to go to Georgia. And the only reason he didn't is because he's easily distracted. I mean, all of his issues really kind of remain with his attitude and just kind of maybe off-field stuff. Nobody's doubting Zach Evans' talent. So if Lane Kiffin can just keep him locked in from game 1 to game 12, he should rush for well over 1,000 yards and be a big asset to this Ole Miss team. I thought Ulysses Bentley from SMU is a good pickup at that position as well. Wide receiver was kind of a concern for them last year, and I do think that is carries over into this year. Did add Watkins from Louisville, like that pickup, but it's still not a very deep room, so that's not ideal considering that you're going to be breaking in a first-year quarterback either way. The offensive line is actually pretty solid. Did protect Corral last year, but now, like I said, it's a new guy. Corral was definitely a guy who could evade the rush. I don't really know if that's going to remain true this year. So as far as defensively, I mean, Kiffin is high on this front four. I don't think that means that they're going to necessarily step up well against some of the better O-lines in this conference. It just means that it's probably the best he's had since he's been there. I think linebacker could be a thin position. Like I said, lost a lot off of last year's team at that second level. I think secondary is probably the strength of this defense. I like what they have at safety and do like their nickelback as well. Something that was kind of alarming to me, I guess, Ole Miss didn't have one guy on the preseason All-SEC team, not the first, second, or third team. So that's not necessarily ideal. But with that being said, it's not the end-all, be-all. Ole Miss's season win total was actually at 8. My first reaction was that is far too high. I think this is probably a 7-5 team, but they got an easy schedule, especially to start the year. I mean, just look at this: Troy, Central Arkansas, at Georgia Tech, Tulsa. I'm not saying that they cover all 4 of those weeks, but it's really hard to see them losing any one of those games. So it's probably going to be a 4-0 start. I think Kentucky is a toss-up game, and then you're going to go on the road and beat Vanderbilt. I mean, Ole Miss, without having a lot figured out, could start the year 6-0 based on their schedule alone. Obviously, though, the back half of the season is going to be tough. I think realistically they probably win one of those games against Auburn and then at LSU, but they're not going to College Station and beating A&M. They're not beating Alabama at home. I think at Arkansas is a tough game that I've kind of classified as a toss-up right now. And then I think Mississippi State is kind of in that same vein as well. So if you bet this over 8, you're going to feel real good about week 6, week 7, but it could get dicey towards the end. If they did have if they had Arkansas schedule and their season win total was at 8, I'd be hammering the under. But this is as favorable a schedule as you're going to get. It's definitely backloaded, but listen, that does allow Lane Kiffin to kind of get some of his issues ironed out against weaker competition. So that was kind of the main thing holding me off playing the under 8. I still lean that way for sure. I think this team's got a lot to figure out on both sides of the ball, but their schedule does play pretty favorably. All right, if I were to have a third season win total bet in the SEC, it would have been on LSU to win under 6.5 games. Listen, first-year head coach Brian Kelly, I know he has a very good reputation coming over from Notre Dame, but this is not a good situation yet. It's just not. Quarterback battle is uncertain. Personally, I've heard a lot of different things. I think the fans like Miles Brennan, and I get it. I like Miles Brennan too, but I don't think he's anything more than an average quarterback. I think Jaden Daniels is the best option to start the year. He's played way more football than Miles Brennan. He's got better numbers than Miles Brennan, and he's very mobile as well. So I personally, it'd be Jaden Daniels for me. But then you also got Garrett Nussmeier as well, who's probably the future in years to come. So right off the bat, there's a lot of uncertainty at the most important position on the team. I think there's a lot of variance with this running back room. I mean, you get John Emery Jr. back, who spent all of last season ineligible. He's very talented, 5 yards per carry throughout his career in 18 career games. But, it's not exactly a sure thing that he's going to be able to play game 1 through 12. I mean, he's had issues in the past. I thought Noah Cain was a okay pickup. Didn't really do much at Penn State. That could be more of the Penn State offensive line than Noah Cain. He was obviously very talented coming out of high school. This offensive line does return 3 starters, but kind of like Florida. I don't necessarily think they're bad, but this is not a LSU caliber offensive line. It's just not. I mean, they obviously had some major issues running the football early last season. Now they eventually figured it out. It's not necessarily the ideal front five that Brian Kelly would have dreamed up when he took this job. Now, the one thing that can really kind of be a difference maker with this LSU team is Kayshon Boutte. I mean, by my estimation, could be one of the top receivers in college football. He's going to get targeted a lot, and he's probably going to respond well to that. He is a difference-making wide receiver. The issue with relying on one guy, though, is, and especially in LSU's circumstance, if Boutte goes down, if Boutte has a bad day, I have major concerns about depth, both at wide receiver and then as well as tight end as well. So, if Boutte stays healthy game 1 through 12, I do think he elevates the passing game in a major way, but it's really tough to rely on one guy. In a sport like football, you need quality depth really at every position to be a championship level team. And they're going to be asking a lot out of Kayshon Boutte this year. Defensively, I actually like LSU's front four. I think it's certainly going to be the strength of this defense. BJ Ujulari, Ali Gay, Mason Smith. I mean, 3 really good guys to have in your front four. I do think their linebackers are solid, but I do worry about depth there. And, I do still think that the better rushing attacks in this conference could have their way in the run game. Obviously, they lose Stingley. Rick's transferred out of the program, so there are questions at secondary. Brian Kelly attacked that hard in the portal. But like I said, I've said this in past videos. I think relying overly on the transfer portal and just thinking that's going to fix your issues, it doesn't really work in my mind. You build good units and good players from the ground up. There's no continuity in this secondary right now. So I actually don't have as high of expectations as most. I think right off the bat, we're going to find out a lot about LSU in that game. It's basically a pseudo home game playing in New Orleans, but playing in the Superdome against Florida State. I really like the makeup of this Florida State team. I kind of alluded to that earlier. I think that's just a toss-up game. I really do. Obviously, we've still got about 3 weeks till that game takes place, so I haven't made a wager on it, but I really like this Florida State team. I think that's got a very, very tough game for LSU to start the year. Mississippi State's a toss-up game. I think at Auburn's a toss-up game. I think Tennessee's a better football team. I think Ole Miss is a better football team. Going on the road and playing at Florida, I think Florida has the slight edge in that game. And then after the bye week, you're not beating Alabama. I think at Arkansas is a tough game. Yeah, I think UAB is actually one of the better group of 5 teams, but it's certainly a game that they should win pretty handily, but probably not going on the road and beating A&M. I think for LSU season 1 total to cash on the over, probably going to have to win 2 of those 3 games early in the season against Florida State, Mississippi State, and then at Auburn. Might sound easy. It's not going to be easy. Just because they brought Brian Kelly in, doesn't mean this team's in a better place immediately. So I lean heavily towards the under 6.5. I made it just over 6, so it just wasn't quite enough for me to be on it officially. I have a hard time seeing this team win in 7 games, though. I ended up laying off, but I'm really not that high on this LSU team. All right, moving on to Tennessee. I would say overall, it was definitely a positive year for Josh Heupel in year 1. Averaged 39 points per game last year. The offense looked explosive, just like it did at UCF under Heupel. So that was certainly a revelation. One of his only bad moves was naming Joe Milton the starter to start the year. Hendon Hooker was clearly a better guy. And personally, I think what Hooker did last year was nothing short of incredible. 69% through the air, 9.8 yards per attempt, 26 touchdowns to just 3 interceptions, and then 561 yards on the ground as well. This guy is a Heisman level quarterback. I believe that. He plays in a system that's going to yield for a lot of yards and a lot of points. So I think that helps out his cause. This is a team that I can actually run the ball really well too. Definitely was kind of a pleasant surprise, at least for me last year. So I do think the run game should be pretty effective once again. It's not really a team filled with a bunch of difference-making receivers. You have Cedric Tillman, who could certainly mold into that guy, but guys are going to get more so schemed open than anything else. I do think the rest of that wide receiving room has talent, but I think it's just a matter of who emerges this year. The X factor of this team, quite clearly, and what could be the difference in 2 or 3 wins, is the offensive line. On the one hand, they returned 4 starters, but on the other hand, they allowed the most sacks in the SEC last year, and that's even with a really mobile guy like Hooker. They just underperformed last year, so I think the hope is these guys are a year older, and you can certainly always get better, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily guaranteed considering how bad they were in pass protection last year. It's really the X factor of the team, the way I look at it. I feel good about what they have at quarterback and running back, but to take that next step, you've got to be good up front, especially in this conference. Defensively, they do have a lot to replace on their front four, but I do think they'll be able to get after the passer and get off the edge. Linebackers are developing nicely. I think it's just a matter of, how does that translate to playing some of these really tough SEC opponents and going up against Georgia's running backs and Alabama's running backs. I think that remains to be seen. Trayvon Flowers obviously leads the secondary, but I think they still need to find one more reliable corner. But I do think their safeties are very reliable. They've got a tough test early in the season at Pitt. Pitt is going to be the antithesis of Tennessee in the sense that Pitt is a team that's built basically from the front out. I like what Pitt has on the front four, each side of the ball. Pitt was second in the country in sacks last year. So really good pass rushing team against a team that gave up some of the most sacks in the country last year, and the most sacks in the SEC. That doesn't figure to bode that well for Tennessee. I think Tennessee will be a sexy pick in that game. I actually give Pitt the slight edge at home in that one. From there, though, Tennessee's only surefire losses are against Alabama and then at Georgia. Just don't preseason. I'm not going to predict them to win either one of those games. It really just comes down to how are they going to fare on the road at LSU, at home against Kentucky, a tough game on the road at South Carolina, end of the season. I think there's just too many questions for me to, be like, oh, I'm all on this over 7.5 or 8 wins. With that being said, I obviously with the level of quarterback play they're going to get, with how good they're going to be able to run the ball, it's not going to be an issue of scoring points. It's really going to come down to how quickly can this offensive line develop, and then just can they take that next step defensively. I would lean towards the over, but I do think there are some losable games on the schedule. Love the makeup of this team, specifically this offense, but I did hold off of any bets. All right, Kentucky is a really interesting team. I had people in the SEC quarterback tier ranking video, telling me I was stupid because I didn't say Will Levis was the next Aaron Rodgers or the next Cam Newton. As you see right here, I'm not even exaggerating. These people actually believe that. Listen, I love the program that Mark Stoops has built. Won 10 games last year. I think it's the most underrated program in the country, arguably. Listen, Will Levis is a above average quarterback. Almost 67% through the air. 8 yards per attempt is solid. I think the issue I have with Levis is showed way too much inconsistency last year. 12 interceptions is far too high. He played like trash against Florida, and then also on the road at Mississippi State. If you're saying this guy is that good, he can't play that bad in those kind of games. So I don't like that about him. He is mobile, which is always going to be a plus. The reality of it is, though, they should just pound the ground game. Chris Rodriguez Jr., almost 1,400 yards on the ground last year and over 6 yards per carry in the SEC. He should be getting 25 to 30 carries a game, a true bell cow back. By far, the biggest loss on this offense was Wan'Dale Robinson. He was truly an X factor on the outside. Levis is not even going to have that true go-to guy, at least as of now. Obviously, somebody can emerge, but I haven't seen that yet. So it's probably going to be, spreading the wealth more. Another concern, too, is they lost a few really key starters on the offensive line. Kind of like I said with LSU and Florida, it's not that I think that this is going to be a bad offensive line, but I just have my questions. And the way I handicap football, I put a lot of stock into how you fare up front. So it's kind of the wrong position group to be having questions about. Defensively, I really like what they have. Linebacker is a huge strength for them. Got a lot of young talent in that front four as well. I think cornerback is another mystery for me that, preseason, I don't have a great feel as to how they're going to defend the pass. Do have a good pair of safeties, but teams are going to challenge those young corners. So it's just kind of a mystery as to how those guys step up. Looking at their schedule, 3 easy non-conference games in their first 4 games. I think at Florida, I said this earlier, on paper, I give them the slight edge in that game, but it's much easier said than done to go into the swamp and win that game. Even though I'm low on Florida, still certainly a losable game for Kentucky. I think at Ole Miss is a true toss-up game, and I think Mississippi State is a toss-up game as well. Should be South Carolina at home. That game was close last year, though. Play some tough games at the end of the season, though. I mean, I do lean Tennessee in Knoxville. Don't think they're beating Georgia. I mean, couldn't move the ball on Georgia last year. Why should I think that now, after losing your best player offensively, that you're going to be able to do so this year? And, I think at Missouri, second game of a back-to-back road game stretch, I bet you that Tennessee game is the way they run, that's going to take a lot out of that Kentucky team. Going on the road to Missouri is anything but a surefire win. If Louisville hasn't thrown in the towel by that point in the season, I think Malik Cunningham is one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the country. Louisville's got things working for him. So it'll be interesting to see how some of these toss-up games go. I didn't have a great feel on the season win total. It's pretty much what I made it. Teams that are going to play a lot of toss-up games in my mind, probably ones to avoid as far as preseason bets. But, I do think there are some legitimate concerns about this Kentucky team. It's why their win total is at 7.5. I mean, this is not really a team that's expected to come even close to competing with a team like Georgia. So I know Kentucky fans are like super high on Will Levis, but I just don't see him in that same way, and do think this team has things to figure out here throughout the season. I feel like I've kind of been hinting at it all video. I think Mississippi State is maybe one of the most interesting teams in the country. Went 7-6 last year. Really had a bad end of the year. No other way to put it. Didn't look good against Ole Miss, and then just totally threw the towel in against Texas Tech in that bowl game. With that being said, I mean, year 3 of Mike Leach, by far the most experienced team he's had. Before Mike Leach, you had Joe Moorhead and Dan Mullen, two guys that like to run the football, like to use quarterbacks in the run game. This wasn't exactly the perfect situation and as far as a roster standpoint, for Mike Leach to inherit. Will Rogers is now going to be a third-year starter. I mean, this is a guy that's completed 75% of his passes a year ago. I don't care if you're playing in the air raid scheme. 75% is 75%. I mean, 35 touchdowns to 8 interceptions. I think he's clearly a top 5 quarterback in the conference. Showed major strides last year. I think the one thing for him is can he start moving the ball vertically a little bit more and creating explosive plays through the air? He's got both of his running backs back, both figure to be a big part of the passing game in that system. This is a Mississippi State wide receiving core that, lots of guys that project well as slot receivers, good, reliable, possession type of guys. I still think they need to find that one guy on the outside. I mean, they obviously lose Marks, so need to find that one guy who can start stretching the field a little bit and start creating some explosive plays. Think that takes this offense to a whole other level. Lost both their tackles on the offensive line. So going up against a good pass rush could be difficult for them. I think the underrated part about this team too is their defense. I mean, this is a Mississippi State team that gets their entire front 4 back. They are loaded at linebacker, both starting, and then they got great depth there as well. So front 7 for Mississippi State is going to be a whole lot better than a lot of people think. I guess the issue is I do think some of the better passing offenses in the SEC, could be able to have their way with this Mississippi State defense. I think secondary is just a major question mark. For as good as I feel about that front 7, I do have a lot of concerns about that back 4 or 5. Win total is at 6.5. That's around where I made it. I really do lean towards the over, though. I think this is a really good football team. I mean, start the year against Memphis and then at Arizona. Neither one of those are necessarily like surefire wins. I mean, they lost to Memphis last year. And then obviously going on the road against a Power 5 opponent, it's easier said than done. But, in theory, 2 games that they should win by more than a touchdown. I think at LSU is a toss-up game, as I alluded to. But, I mean, Bowling Green should be a win. I mean, from there, like I said, the only surefire losses I see are Alabama and Georgia. I think A&M is on paper is a slight loss, but that's definitely a winnable game for Rodgers and co. I mean, they did it in College Station last year. I think they'll probably split that Arkansas and Kentucky 2-game stretch. Do get Arkansas at home and played them close last year. But going on the road to Kentucky is tough. I do lean towards a win for them against Auburn after that bye week. Obviously, it'll beat East Tennessee State. I think at Ole Miss is one right now that on paper, I do favor Ole Miss. Maybe Rodgers and co. do get over the hump and go win that game in Oxford. Heavy lean towards the over here. It just wasn't enough for me to bet it. Like I said, going to play a lot of close games. I think this will be a great if you're catching Mississippi State over a touchdown in any game that's not Alabama or Georgia, I would take it. I mean, I had a lot of success backing this team last year. Team that's going to play a lot better against stiffer competition than you might think. All right, on to South Carolina. Obviously, I mean, what Shane Beamer did last year was really unbelievable in my mind. Saw no way that they were even going to make a bowl game. And then once they got matched up with North Carolina, didn't think they'd win that game, but they did. Shane Beamer defied the odds all year. Took some advantage of some really good spots for him. But good for them. They went 7-6 and really made a huge upgrade at the quarterback position. Say what you want about Spencer Rattler and if he was overrated at Oklahoma. I mean, listen, he completed 71% of his passes, 9 yards per attempt, 37 touchdowns, 212 interceptions. I mean, his main issue was turnovers in big games. It happened a lot against Texas. He got replaced in that game last year. Think about what they had this time last year. I mean, they had Zeb Noland, who was a graduate assistant, playing quarterback for him last year. And then Jason Brown was not very good either. This is a huge upgrade any way you look at it. I think people are overlooking that just because they don't like Rattler. I don't like Rattler either, but huge upgrade at that position for him. The issue I have, though, is I don't really like what they have at running back. I mean, got Christian Beal-Smith from Wake Forest, but, under 5 yards per carry in the ACC. Is that going to translate well to the SEC level? I mean, I don't think he's going to be anything special. And then Marshall Lloyd, who's their other option, 3.6 yards per carry a year ago. So I don't love what they have in the running game. They return all 5 starters on the offensive line, but I mean, this was a unit that was among the worst in the SEC last year. So I do think there's just overall question marks there. With all 5 guys returning, would expect improvement, but what does that really look like? I don't think that's really easy to judge at this point. I also don't think Rattler's got a ton of just difference-making wide receivers on the outside. Did bring over Austin Stogner with him from Oklahoma. Think he'll finish with some of the best tight end stats in the country this year. Think that was an underratedly really good pickup for Shane Beamer and co. Defensively, I mean, kind of like the offensive line, they return a lot on the defensive line, mostly in the interior, but it just wasn't a great unit a year ago. Do have a lot of experience at linebacker, which is obviously a plus. So now you've got a pretty experienced front seven. Really just the gist of this team. They got a lot coming back, but they've got to be better if they want to duplicate what they did last year. Still, secondary should be the strength once again. I think this is going to be a pretty good defense that it's not going to get torched. As far as their schedule goes, don't think they're going on the road and beating Arkansas, and don't think they're beating Georgia either. Should be a 3-2 start nonetheless. I think at Kentucky is a tough game, but by all accounts, going to start the year 3-3. I mean, from there, got to beat Missouri at home. Probably going to go on the road and beat Vanderbilt. You just got to win one of those other 4 games to cash this season win total over the 5.5. I mean, don't think it's going to come against Texas A&M. Personally, I think it's probably either at Florida or Tennessee. I would expect this team to get better throughout the year. They took advantage of a team like Florida last year that had essentially quit at that point of the season late in the year. That could happen once again this year. We don't know. Tennessee can put up points, but they're not exactly solid in all facets of the game. So in South Carolina, could easily be a win. At the end of the day, I did make it around 5.5, so didn't really have much of a feel on the season win total. They got a lot better at quarterback. I just think a lot of this experience is just going to have to turn into better production, especially up front on both the offensive and defensive line, if this team wants to be a 7-win team. All right, really interesting offseason, obviously, for Auburn. I mean, quite a bit of turbulence for Brian Harsin. I mean, let's not forget, Auburn was 6-2 at one point last year. They were up 28-3 on Mississippi State in that 9th game of the season. Mississippi State came all the way back and beat Auburn at Jordan-Hare. They lost their last 3 games of the regular season, including just a tough loss to Alabama at home. And then they lost to Houston in the bowl game. So it was looking like a really good year for Brian Harsin, but it went south and quick. As far as the makeup of this team, I was not a big Bo Nix guy, and I'm not really a big Bo Nix guy now. But I do think he would have started if he had stayed at Auburn. I get why he didn't, change of scenery, things of that nature. But, I mean, Zach Calzada and TJ Finley are, essentially spitting images of each other. Yeah, they might have strong arms, but, I mean, both those guys last year were at 56% completion. That's gross. Both were right around 6.5 yards per attempt, so didn't show much ability to stretch the field vertically. Calzada played more, so he did throw more picks, but neither one of these guys should inspire much confidence in Auburn fans. I think Robbie Ashford is kind of the X factor, transfer from Oregon, who supposedly had a really good spring. I mean, I think it's probably going to have to be him if this team wants to make a bowl game. And that's just me being honest. I mean, if Auburn fans want to get mad at me for that, get mad at me for that. But I mean, TJ Finley and Zach Calzada, probably some of the worst quarterbacks in the SEC. The good thing, though, while quarterback might not be figured out, you're going to have a really good running game. I mean, Tank Bigsby is back, 1,100 yards on the ground last year, a true every down back that can certainly carry the load game to game. But they also got Jaquez Hunter, too. It's kind of a change of pace, home run hitting kind of back. I really like both of those guys. This is going to be a team that really just kind of exclusively runs the ball, especially considering they don't really have a lot established at the wide receiver position. If somebody does emerge, it's going to be a really young player who just hasn't proven himself up to this point. You have a solid tight end, but it's just not going to – I don't suspect it's going to be a very good passing game. Something that does go well with the run game, though, the O-line is veteran-laden. And the offensive line was a strength for this team last year. Obviously, they lost Derek Mason to Oklahoma State. But, still, I think this defense projects to be pretty good, especially on the front four. You've obviously got Derek Hall up front, Colby Wooden. This front four is assuredly going to be the strength of the defense. They lost a lot at linebacker. I think those are some big shoes to fill. Owen Papo is a third-team preseason All-SEC linebacker, but going to need to see it before I believe it. Also lost Roger McCreary from last year's team, first-team All-American DB. I mean, that is a huge loss. They used him in a ton of different ways. They, in theory, have the depth to account for those losses they had in the secondary, but it's probably a unit that's going to regress nonetheless. So this is a team with a season win total at 6. Easy start to the season. I think Penn State and Missouri, both games at home that I give them the slight edge in on paper, but they could absolutely drop either one of those games. I think LSU at home is a toss-up game. By the way, 5 straight home games to start the year is just lunacy. Whoever made that schedule deserves a huge – Auburn fans have got to be just ecstatic about that. But things obviously are going to get tougher, though. I mean, not going and beating Georgia. The only other game the back half of the season that I count as a win right now is Western Kentucky. And even Western Kentucky has a season win total at 8.5. So if things really do fall apart at Auburn, I think Western Kentucky could absolutely go into Jordan-Hare and win that game. I think Arkansas at home is going to be a competitive game. And I do think they could go on the road and be competitive against Ole Miss too. If you're an Auburn fan, though, you've got to go at least 4-1 in those first 5 home games because things are going to get a lot tougher. And then probably going to have to pull off an upset. Maybe Arkansas, maybe Ole Miss. Needless to say, I made it closer to like 5.7 as my season win total. So I do lean towards the under. But very favorable, much like Ole Miss, very favorable start to the season. And, I do think there's some variance with this team as well. All right, moving on to Missouri, went 6-6 last year. Things just kind of played out like you might have projected they would preseason on paper. I mean, they really beat the teams they were supposed to beat and then just didn't really step up in competition all that well. They actually already named the starter, Brady Cook. He only has 31 career attempts, and he hasn't been all that impressive in those attempts. So, I thought it would have been Tyler Macon because of what he can do with his legs, but Eli Drinkwitz made that decision. So it's going to be Brady Cook, who's much more of a traditional pocket passer. Big loss in the run game. I mean, Tyler Beatty was one of the most underrated running backs in the country. Obviously a big loss, but so it's probably going to be more of a committee approach for Missouri this year. We'll see if somebody emerges. Not counting that out. As far as the wide receiver position, they got one guy established out there. Drinkwitz has recruited that position pretty well since he's been at Missouri. It's still only year 3 under the Eli Drinkwitz regime. I think you're going to have to watch out for some of those guys who were highly touted as prospects turning into pretty good players at Missouri. I also like what they return on the offensive line. I mean, they really set the tone for Beatty to have a big year on the ground. And I think their tackles are going to be good in pass protection once again. It's really going to come down to, can they just not have a huge drop-off in the run game? What are they going to get out of their quarterback play? So I think some of it remains to be seen, but I was actually higher on this unit than I might have thought before. Defensively was obviously the issue a year ago. I mean, they got torched against the run pretty routinely. I don't like what they have on their defensive line. It just comes down to depth. Talking about teams like Georgia and Auburn, they're able to rotate a lot of these elite talents and keep those guys fresh. Teams like Missouri right now just don't have that luxury. I do think that they can produce something off the edge. They also lost both of their cornerbacks, which is not ideal as well. I mean, there's obviously going to be options there, but you just don't know how those guys get replaced. Luckily, though, I would say safeties are going to be the strength of the secondary. I'd much rather the strength be in the front four, the front seven, but their strength is safety. So I don't have a great feel for this defense, to be quite honest with you. But I do think this is a team that overall could surprise some people, kind of like Mississippi State this year. Win total is at 5.5. I mean, I count 4 games that should be, pretty clear wins with Louisiana Tech, Abilene Christian, Vandy, and then New Mexico State. I mean, could they go on the road and beat Auburn? Sure. I mean, I'm not going to project that necessarily to happen, but it's fathomable. Could they beat Kentucky at home in kind of a weird spot for them? Sure. But from there, it's hard to see them going on the road with as many questions as they have and holding up all that well. I think they're sneaky. I think they're a team you got to watch out for, but I'm really not expecting them to win any more than 6 games this year. All right, and on to Vanderbilt lastly. Bad football team and not worth talking about. End of segment. Alrighty, guys, that's going to do it for today's episode. I appreciate everybody tuning in. Want to go over my 2 plays once again really quickly. We had Arkansas over the 7.5 wins at plus 135, and then Florida under the 7 wins. Excited to see the folks from Gainesville hop on me for that, but that's all right. I can take it. Let me know any agreements or disagreements you have in the comment section below. Also, feel free to like the video. That really helps out what I'm trying to build here. I really appreciate that. Subscribe so you don't miss any of the upcoming content. And then I'll remind you once again, my main platform is on Twitter, so you can follow me there at Fordham Betting. We're done with the preseason preview series now. I have some kind of miscellaneous things planned here over the next week or 10 days, but pretty soon here, guys, it's going to be a lot of game breakdowns. I'm still trying to decide how I want to structure that. If I want to do more long form shows or just kind of individual videos where I'm just breaking down certain games. So stay tuned for the upcoming content. A lot to be excited about this time of year. Thank y'all again for tuning in. And like I said, going to have a lot more college football content. It's the best time of the year. Hallelujah. I'll be back here in a few days with another video. Thanks.